No, we're on the hook now. They're going to record us.
Yeah, no going back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and Auto Remarketing. In today's webinar, creating a buying center for inventory sourcing, we have a great session in store brought to you by TradePending. But before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items for today's webinar. We are recording today's session and we'll make the recording available to you as soon as possible. You'll be in listen-only mode for our session today, but you can ask questions using the chat function here on Zoom, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during our time here together. So let's get right into today's session featuring Sean Niffin of Germain Motor Company and Joe Dallas with TradePending. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time for today's webinar.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Niff,
It's an honor. It's an honor. I'm following in David Metter's footsteps. I mean, you know, that right there, it says enough, right?
Well, Niff, let's begin with you. And before we officially got started, mentioned how much things have changed over the past 2 years from a used car manager, a used vehicle department perspectives. Just what would you say have been those main changes that you've seen in the industry overall, and anything you care to share about what's happening at your group?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying that we've seen a lot of change in the last 2 years, but I think some of the changes are permanent. And our industry is moving into a hybrid version of people wanting to order their vehicles. I think I saw something from Wards a couple weeks ago where they said 47% of the customers actually now want to order their vehicle versus just going to the lot. A lot of our stores are sold out for the next 6 weeks because they're selling inventory that's been allocated to us. But the changes have been, I think, are good. I mean, I don't think any of us want to go back to a 90-day inventory. None of us really want to go back to where we came from, but you know, it's rich in tradition. You know, we've been on the digital side for a long time and have been blessed to be compatriots with guys like David Metter and David Kane, who you know, have helped spearhead our digital approach into the market. And all of a sudden in 1 year, we realized the significance, and we've recognized a new profit center, and that was in acquiring vehicles. I mean, it wasn't even on our radar 2 years ago, pre-COVID. We weren't thinking about how can we buy more cars from people. We were just relying on the auctions, and we were reliant on trade-ins, and that's what we did. And we either made money wholesaling cars or we didn't. Now, certainly acquiring vehicles has become a bit of art and a bit of science, but we've never seen market conditions like this ever. I mean, we're selling cars for full retail. It's not negotiable anymore. We're getting more money for cars at wholesale because some companies, like rental car companies, are willing to buy the car no matter what we put on there because they can recuperate those monies. If you've even tried to rent a car lately, you understand it's about as much per day as it used to cost for a week. So that has certainly changed things. And most of us have probably taken advantage of the fact that our car was worth more than it was when we bought it 2 years ago. I went through that last year. I sold a car last year for what I paid for it 2 years previously. I'm like, that just doesn't happen. And I've got another car that continues to go up in value even with the mileage that's on it. So it's pretty amazing, right? So it's exciting because we're a part of this. And we'll be telling our grandchildren, like, I was there when this happened, you know, when we had to use a mouse.
Right.
So interestingly enough, but I think the biggest thing right now in what we've learned from opening our buying centers is that it really is becoming more and more reliant on what the customer experience is like. We're dealing with Vroom, we're dealing with Carvana. They want to demonize dealers, but the truth is they're not doing anything different than we are. And I think being able to acquire vehicles really comes down to what kind of an experience can we give customers, right? I think, can you deliver a customer experience in the customer's driveway? I think that's a big one right there.
Well said, Niff. Thank you for giving such a great lay of the land from the dealer perspective. Joe, from your perspective as a service provider, your observations of the industry the past couple of years, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost, we only succeed because we have great partners like NIF that are willing to be early adopters on things and help us guide our own product vision and make better decisions as a company. But I think like everybody else, when everything started shutting down, we were kind of hold on to your hats and let's see how this goes. And I guess universally, I guess we made some good decisions. One, in that we were already sort of had a beachhead in this whole vehicle acquisition thing, which trade being 70% or consumer owned vehicles being 70% of what makes up a retail inventory according to NADA, that we were already helping dealers sort of bridge that gap. The other thing that we really benefited from and had never really planned on being pandemic proof by any means. I don't think any company ever plans out that far. Maybe they will now, but the whole market volatility thing, because of scarcity, because of the shutdown at the factories, created this inventory vacuum. It created wild fluctuations in prices, as Niff was talking about. And since the first Model T rolled off the line with old Henry Ford, I mean, it's one of the craziest times in automotive history in my lifetime, certainly. But even with all of that, because the backing logic behind what we do is market centric, right? We don't really look at book values or anything like that. We were able to adjust as the market adjusted. So we saw higher adoption, i.e. new dealers signing up because we do produce a lot of opportunities. We saw lower attrition, i.e. dealers, going away because they suddenly needed as many at-bats as they could get to get inventory. And maybe more importantly, depending on your place at the dealer, we never got a single complaint about our values being, quote, wrong. Whereas, we had some other competitors that, at that same time, unfortunately, kind of got behind the eight ball and had to do disclaimers saying, hey, who's to say what this car's worth, But, we were able to be constantly skating to the puck, literally daily and could see, hey, a Ford F-150 in the year 2021 appreciated 37%, right? Like we had, for the first time in history, a positive regression line. So, the older a car got, the more valuable it got. And it didn't happen across the board. But we've always had this linear regression of mileage versus value, right? And for the first time, we saw that regression like flip on its head. And so a lot of interesting things, but I think we did everything we could to support our dealer base and to continue to innovate. And, one of the things that came out of that, Nick, was, the market was telling us, hey, you guys, the range value tool is great. It converts great. It gives us a lot of opportunities. We really need a methodology in order to give consumers a single value. And so the next kind of turn of the crank for us was what NIF's using at their buying centers, which is Snap Offer, which is simply a single price platform that puts, two things. One, doesn't diminish the dealer's brand and their process. So, Germain gets to do Germain how they want to in our platform. And then secondly, gives them all the power on choosing what questions matter the most to them. And then how the answers to those questions affect the final values. And so you have some stores out there that maybe only have 5 questions that really matters. Give 5 questions. Has it been towed? Is the windshield cracked? Give me a 1 to 10 on the exterior, and I'm pretty sure I can put a number on this car. And then others have, 15 questions. Market, based on the market, based on what's most important to the dealer. And so that's been really well received. And thanks to, some smart folks like Niff and Germain, we've been able to sort of refine that on the provider side. And really what we're trying to do is just enable, groups like NIFs to more adequately be armed to acquire as much as they can.
Excellent. Well, that's so great to hear all of that positive development and trajectory for the tool and in your shop, Joe. Nif, turning back to you, kind of before we get into the kind of nuts and bolts of a buying center and that sort of thing, another kind of broad overview question. As Joe referenced, the chip shortage and manufacturing certainly has been a top of mind issue. From your perspective, just how head scratching has all of this been to, as a dealer, how the pipeline has been dropping off as far as new vehicles coming into the pipeline, and then the spillover effect into the used market. Just your observations on what this has been like starting from the factory and on down.
Yeah, I think the manufacturers are still trying to get this figured out. And I think some are doing a better job than others. I mean, I was glad to see Honda. We have 6 Honda stores now, and I was glad to see Honda sort of put in transit as a viable deal for us. That helped tremendously. And Toyota sort of followed suit, and now we're loading in production vehicles in the inventory using fake VINs, and that certainly opens up the inventory possibilities because it creates inquiries with customers, and we can sort of talk them off the ledge and say, hey, look, car's going to be here in a couple of weeks. It's just not here now, even though we may have a very, very limited. But imagine Honda has a 3-day supply nationwide. It's crazy. And when you talk to the Honda reps, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but they're talking model year 2025 before some sense of normalcy returns to the market. That's 2 years from now. So almost 2.5, I'd probably say. But I think one of the things that has not changed, and Joe said it, when he said, Jermaine's been part of this, we were one of the early adopters of TradePending, because what we noticed was, and this hasn't changed, but we still get over 100 leads a week from TradePending. When you take all of our daughter sites, when you take JermaineCars.com, and the reason being is that we are continually, and I don't think Joe even knows this, but we continually remarket our website visitors from our daughter sites and from Germaine Cars. We remarket to them with an ad that says, what's my car worth? And for us, the customer begins the journey with that thought. In other words, if you see a vehicle you like, you're probably going to start with that saying, well, I like that, but what's my car worth? So we've seen a lot of value, and there's a difference between a customer, and this goes, Captain Obvious just walked in the room, I get it. But for a customer that wants to sell their car versus a customer who just wants to know what their car's worth, it's a very different journey. And we do see segmentation within the marketplace where customers do deal with the trade separately before they start the transaction on a new one. We get that and we respect that. But we've been running that ad for 4 years now straight, and we have an amazing click-through around that because we understand the significance of how important it is for a customer who's looking at vehicles to understand what their car is worth, and they're looking at it, monitoring it. So I think that right there, along with the manufacturers being able to help us with the customers, knowing that cars are coming in. And then finally, the other thing too, is we're seeing more and more of these digital retailing tools. At last count, I think Automotive Ventures said there was over 30 different digital retailing tools. That is lending itself to an experience too, where customers can sort of, do the math, if you will, right? And it's up to the dealers to sort of backfill that opportunity with a great experience, letting the customers, figure out what their deal is, and then, moving forward with that. But as much as we think that we're in charge, the customer is still in charge. They really want a great experience. And we think that this is lending itself to that. I don't want to have to go look all over the country for a car. I can only imagine how frustrating that can be for someone, right? And I think our grandparents used to order cars like this. They'd order a car and it'd come in a couple of weeks, right? It's gone full circle.
If I'd like to pick up on another thing that you just mentioned, that often asked question that comes from the customer is, what's my car worth? What's my vehicle worth? Just how has that conversation evolved from say maybe 5-10 years ago to what the conversation is like now? how has it evolved? How has it changed?
Well, I don't think it changes the front end of that deal, but it certainly has an impact on the back end of that deal. And what I mean by that is that many people know our relationship with a company called Outsell. We created a centralized data platform. Basically, we unsiloed all of our data and created a communication platform that allows us to communicate to a customer based on the car they're driving, not where they bought the car necessarily. So one thing we've learned from that is if you wait till the month your lease is up, you are not going to get a car. So you have to begin that process way early in the calendar year, like almost a year in advance. How much of a significance that is, because that has happened and not everybody got the memo. I think a lot of customers now are realizing, like, okay, if I need a truck, because I have to have a truck, and I always buy Fords, but now I may have to look at Chevy, and I may have to look at Ram. I may even have to look at new Toyota Tundra. But the thing is this: you have to start early now, because there's significance in that if you have a lease return. But think about this: how many people do you know have equity in their lease now that they didn't have before? So would you be willing to pay a customer a couple $100 to say, I don't care where you bought it, but I'll pay you to trade your car in here or to turn your car in here? Think about how important lease acquisitions have become to the dealer too. It's a massive profit center.
Again,
Yeah, and I'll just mention from like a consumer behavior standpoint, we're kind of analytic data geeks over here, and one of the things that we saw probably starting in May of last year is a gradual increase in conversion and form completion. So, everybody a couple of years ago was ringing this bell of like, oh, form fill is dead. Well, I've got news for you. I've got, a analytics suite that says the opposite, that people are flocking. And now maybe it's not such a tenuous conversation anymore, because Good Morning America has been telling you for 6 months that your car is appreciating, right? People are more willing to have that conversation. I think the tenuous part is what am I going to do next, right? Because just like moving houses, most people have to sell a house before they can buy another house. And for most people, the car is the same thing. But that the conversation now is the consumer, from my point of view, I'm not in a dealership, but the consumer for the first time ever walks in with a little bit of leverage, right? Which in the past, that wasn't the case. And even now, with that leverage, it really gives the dealer an opportunity to treat their customers right in an age where pretty much all the information that we need is at our fingertips. It's forced a lot of dealers that maybe hadn't had the best track record of treating their consumers or customers very well. Now that conversation's teed up in a much better way.
Very
Agreed.
good. Well, again, our two guest experts here on today's webinar, creating a buying center for inventory sourcing, are Sean Niffen, the marketing and technology director with Germain Motor Company, and Joe Dallas, the chief business officer at TradePending. And Niff, let's get back to you, and then Joe, your perspectives as well from some of your client bases. Get into the title of today's session, creating a buying center for inventory sourcing. What do you see as some of the rudimentary building blocks of what a successful buying center needs to have? Niff, will begin with you, and then Joe, your thoughts as well from what you've heard from clients. What is some fundamentals structure that needs to be in place?
That's a great question. And some of it is going to range on some historical beliefs that we have. First of all, I think, and for those that don't know, Jermaine, we are a decentralized group. We have 19 locations now across 1, 2, 3, soon to be 4 states. And one of the things that has to happen in our group is that our stores have autonomy and the GMs run the store. It's probably why we don't have any turnover at the GM level, is because they like running their store the way that they think they should run. And every brand is different, right? Mercedes-Benz is not Honda. And even though we have 6 Honda stores, they're all different. They're different markets. They're different ways of running the store. The people are different. The brands are received in the market differently. So with that said, it starts with the GM, first of all. They've got to be on board with this thing. The second thing that has to happen is there has to be a champion. There has to be someone who says, this is mine. I'm going to do this. And it isn't a mixed position where maybe they're running a BDC that generates sales and leads for the store to sell cars. This is strictly buying center focused. And we know that the stores who have champions who champion the cause and run that, they do the best job because they're not trying to do both. They're not trying to sell cars. They're only trying to buy cars. I think there's significance in that. But we have this expression that says for every pound of technology we install in a store, we have to put 10 pounds of process behind it. Because without a process, you are going to fail miserably. You may have, without a process, you're going to be one of these stores that has a one and out. They make one phone call, one email, one text message, and they're on to the next lead. And there's an abundance of leads that are coming in from pandemics to say, sell your trade, sell your car. And that's all great. But the average sales cycle for someone to trade in a car right now is over 30 days. It takes a month for someone to make a decision. Maybe it's the paradox of choice. Maybe it's they don't have any choices. Maybe they're just trying to figure out what they want to do, but they don't know what they're going to buy because now they've got to open up their brand loyalties to maybe something they hadn't thought about because they can't find a car. They can't get one. But I would strongly emphasize this: GM involvement, have a champion, and build processes that go beyond a one and out strategy, but build processes that go into possibly 30 days. I've heard that it takes about 2 weekends for a customer to ultimately pull the trigger on them selling us their trade. 2 weekends, not 2 weeks, just 2 weekends. And once they get past that, this needs to help. But that's high level. But I can just tell you this: we've got some great champions, and they do an amazing job. But they own it, and they're not to be messed with.
That's some great color and some great numbers to keep in mind. That 1 pound of software and 10 pounds of process. Very, very clever and insightful. Thank you, Nif. Joe, from your perspective, what have you heard from TradePending clients? What are some fundamentals that's some of those clients have that's led to their successes?
Well, first of all, it's really fun to be the 1 pound guy and not the 10 pound guy. Cause the one thing we can't really do is help with the process, but I will on that point, in 2020, everybody was trying to figure out how to do everything remotely, everything, including selling cars. There were some dealers that were smart and were like, okay, yeah, we're kind of already ahead of this. We sort of get the Carvana thing, we'll deliver, we'll do it all remotely. But there were a ton of dealers who were like, I can just hear the conversation. The dealer principal walks into his GMs and says, we all need digital retailing tools because we need to be able to do this remotely. And everybody scrambles to their phone and everybody checks that box. Okay, we got a digital retailing tool. Right. And through our API partnerships, which we have many with digital retailing tools, we saw an incredible increase in provisioning. Everybody was buying DRTs. And then everybody figured out that if you didn't have a process to back that, or if your DRT didn't match what your in-store process was, all you were doing was creating frustrations. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a trap there with acquisition too. And before the call, we were even talking about, the success that NIF's had and what's the next turn of the crank? Can we brand this? Can we make it even better? And for technology providers, we're trying to enable, but we see it all across different tool sets, is that you can't just check a box and walk away from it. That will be a total disaster, because at the end of the day, how you treat your customers and how they feel, which is a really hard thing to kind of get your arms around sometimes, but how you're making your customers feel through that process it's number one. We see that with DRTs. We see it every day with just our core product. Why aren't we closing these more? It's because you waited 2 weeks to respond to a customer that, had a momentary question of how much their car's worth, and then they went on to something else, and now they don't want to talk to you anymore. It's just really block and tackle things sometimes around those processes that will create more success.
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing to this, is that in regards to digital retailing, we talk about 1 pound of technology and 10 pounds of process. With digital retailing, that becomes an exponential 10 pounds, right? It is even more critical to have processes. And every store that we have, and we don't have consensus across the group as far as who has the best digital retailing tool. We have multiple tools that we use. I don't care if they use crayons and index cards, as long as they use something every day. We have an expression that says EdMed, every day means every day. Like, we do the same thing every single day. But with digital, I have a store that I know launched right during the shutdowns on digital retailing. He spent 3 months thinking and strategizing with his team about what that process would look like, right? And what it really leads up to, it's not the way of doing business anymore. It's a way of doing business. We can't be so boxed in that we only do business one way. We've got to figure out how to do business through multiple channels, just like we advertise through multiple channels. We've learned how to do business in a way that means it's not clunky, it's good with the customer, they like the experience, and they would do it again. And I think digital retailing has sort of opened that. And look, before COVID, Joe, I know you and I and Bryce talked about this for a while. It's like we spent a couple of years just trying to get our stores to face the wind because digital retailing was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then it hit with full vengeance, and they realized the importance of that. So the guys who were ready benefited from them. The guys who didn't are still behind. They still haven't figured it out yet. So
excellent. Well, again, I'm getting the pleasure of asking questions here, but if you have a question for either Sean Niffin of Germain Motor Company or Joe Dallas of TradePending, just use the chat function here on the Zoom platform, and we'll get to those questions as they arrive. And Niff, will continue with you, and then Joe, your perspectives as well. Talked at length and about the importance of processes, but how about getting the dealership team up to speed on those processes via training and continual sharpening of skills? Perhaps it's a Captain Obvious question, but Niff, your thoughts, and Joe, your perspectives as well, just whether it's onboarding a new employee or just keeping the veteran skills sharp, the training aspect of having a buying center. How does that come into play?
that's a great question. So I mean, let's look at what's at stake. In 2020, Carvana acquired about 200,000 vehicles, and they don't have a single brick and mortar place, right? So we recognized the opportunity was definitely there. Like, it wasn't going away because we're like, holy smoke, man, that's a lot of vehicles. And that's 200,000 vehicles that dealers that technically didn't get directly. So that's one thing. But, and whether they acquired them all through trades or just straight acquisitions, who knows, but who cares? But the point is that didn't happen in our, but look at all the customers we have coming through our service drive every single day, right? It's a great source of business for us, for vehicle acquisitions. But when you take all that and you put it together, a few years ago, the Germain family invested a significant amount of money to develop what's called Germain Academy. And it's an open website, germainacademy.com. And you can go in there. And what we did was we built a training facility, state-of-the-art, first class, for all aspects of our business. And what we did with Germain Academy was we brought in our partners. And partners for Germain are very different than vendors. Partners go beyond the paycheck. They go beyond the invoice, and they do things for us that are significant in regards to moving our organization forward. So Germain Academy is filled with these partners who come in, and like tomorrow, Carfax will be here for 2 days, and they'll train our teams on the use of Carfax for life. And whether it's remote or in person, we use the Academy to train up our staff. We have employees who lead roundtable discussions. Last week, we had a one-day roundtable discussion around outsell and the champions that were involved in the general managers. So we use the Academy to expand the knowledge in an industry that is continually changing. We have to keep up with this training. Most stores try to do it in-house, like, hey, let's go back to the lunchroom and we'll bring in Joe from such and such, and he'll show us some of the best things to do. We formalized it immensely. And it is, to say that it has changed our organization would be an understatement. It's an investment that we feel benefits the partners, it strengthens that relationship, and it makes our employees that much better. And we use it for onboarding, so every employee goes through onboarding as well. So it's training, but training in an environment that nurtures and brings growth to the organization.
Very nice. And I'm presuming, Nif, that you are the valedictorian of the Germain Academy. Is
No, my
nice
picture's not even on the wall. We have a wall of fame, and I'm not even on there. So it's fine.
Joe, how about from your perspective on the training component? What have you seen and heard from TradePending clients that's worked for them?
Well, I mean, listen, there are few industries that have higher turnover than automotive, which as a vendor provider helps and hurts us. But for on our side, one of the things that we started doing probably about a year and a half ago was investing in customer success. And it's really easy as a tech provider that had something that was working to just kind of leave it on autopilot, but we could look down the pipeline and see, hey, new products, they're going to require more support. They're going to require more training. We never want to be a CRM company because you're never done training if you're that, complex. But our product suite, and, looking forward, even making some acquisitions to other great, companies that we can fold into the TradePending brand. We saw that we were going to need a more headcount when it came to supporting our customers. So, we've got a great sales office there in, Charleston, South Carolina now, and our sales count, or customer success count across the company has gone up. And that's one of our big focuses in 2022 and beyond is figuring out how to keep refining, how we, support our dealers and how we can continue to enable, those Germain academies. And even when dealers aren't that, formalized in how they train, how we can always be there as a touch point to make sure that everyone in the dealership has knowledge about how it works, what the best practices are, what their options are, what the flexibility is. And that even goes out into, that's a two-way street too. I'll keep coming back to this. Guys like Nif really help guide our product vision, right? So in the last year, TradePending's also invested in an entire product team that's, feet on the street out there talking to dealers about what the pain points are, what our product line could use to make it better, to make it stickier, to make it so they, feel like they can't live without it. In the end of the day, we just want to create good tech that helps bring dealer and consumer together.
Well said. Well said. Again, our two guest experts for today's webinar, creating a buying center for inventory sourcing, are Joe Dallas, the Chief Business Officer at TradePending, and Sean Niffen, the Marketing and Technology Director with Germain Motor Company. And if you have any questions for these gentlemen, please just use the chat function here on the Zoom platform. And gentlemen, a couple of questions have come through, and the first one to to be submitted and pose it to each of you, however you'd like to respond, is in conjunction with the buying center, how are lease acquisitions provisioned? How does that component potentially work into the buying center process?
Well, the importance of that, and I saw that question there and I was like, okay, how do we answer this? So earlier I mentioned that if you don't start the process a year in advance, you may not get a car, right? So how do you create brand loyalty? You start early with the customer. It's having a dialogue with the person who sold you the vehicle that you have a relationship with that says, hey, I know you've heard some crazy things. You've heard about the chip shortage. You know your vehicle's worth a lot of money. If we're going to put you in a new vehicle in the next 12 months, we need to start now. So honestly, for us, it starts with the communication through our centralized data platform, and it begins with a follow-up. Like once someone's in the CDP, we know who they're talking to. We know what they're reading. And that content has created a lot of conversations. So it's about starting early. Now, moving beyond our first party data, that's a little more complicated. Those lists get very expensive, but we would like to expand that. Imagine being able to tap into every Honda owner within 15 miles of a point around our dealership. What if we could communicate to them about acquiring their vehicle? But it starts with the communication, it starts with a conversation, and it begins with a long range plan that says, let's work together on this. What do you want to do? And that's how we do it. It's that simple.
Very nice, very nice. Well, another question that's come to mind, gentlemen, and Nif will continue with you, and then Joe, your thoughts as well. Nif, you referenced earlier how each store in your group is very unique, and should dealerships approach the buying center depending on what their market is? That a store in Amarillo, Texas might have a very different potential client base versus Portland, Oregon, or New York City. How does the market where the rooftop is located come into play? And Joe, love to hear your thoughts as well from the TradePending client base.
So, yeah, this is where it gets complicated. So first of all, there's plenty of companies out there, and we won't name them, but I think everybody knows who we're talking about. But there's these companies that will sell you leads that, based on that, if you have a certain level of contractual obligation to them, they will send you information and leads on people who want to buy cars. That can vary from one side of Columbus, Ohio to the other. It can also vary from one side of Ohio to the other. And we have stores and markets where they might be based in a town of 20,000 people, not 1.8 million. So the population density has a lot to do with that. But ultimately, if you're going to do this, you need a two-prong approach. One is how do you do that with leads from others? And the other one is how would you come to market? Like, do you brand this? Like Lithia, I think, has a thing called Driveway. They decided not to put their name on it, but we all know that it's Lithia. But do you leverage your brand name and say that, trust us, we'll do it in your driveway and bring, come get your car? But I think you have to figure out, like, do you take an influx of leads that are going to everybody? Sort of sounds like our old Auto USA Dealix days. We have leads coming in from everywhere. And that was the name of the game, right? Close 10%, $300 cost per sale. But oh my, how times have changed. But can you come to market, okay, with your own approach to the market and put your signature and your personality behind that because people know you, right? That's the one thing about working for Germain that I will tell you is we have a great reputation, and we're respected in the markets we do business in. Everybody knows us in the Columbus market. We're becoming more known in the other markets we go into, but we feel like leveraging your brand identity is the best way of going about that because of trust. People can trust you. That's our approach to it.
Very nice. Joe, your thoughts on markets and that component of potentially having a buying center?
Nif singing my song on that. I mean, we from day one, never wanted to conflict or diminish a dealership's brand. So, there's vendors that third party companies out there that, they'll take people off of you as the dealer site. They'll send you to a different website and then expose you to competitive inventory. I mean, it's one of the oddest, sort of things that you don't see in other industries. We joke around, if you go to a HomeDepot.com and search for hammers, you'll never see a hammers values provided by Lowe's, right? Like it's just too much conflict there. And so foundationally, totally agree with Nif, and we've even done internal Google Insights surveys that have shown that when you're in the industry, you look at these third-party sites as a really venerable. They're way up there on this pedestal, but for the average consumer that just needs a car, their local dealership website and their local dealerships are still the most relevant information source for them. And if you're smart and you have great customer loyalty and customer lifetime value, then that just becomes this well you can always go back to. And so what we see is an incredible amount of value on, on the way dealers treat their customers around that transaction, because and also, how they're treated through the service process, and what kind of touch points they get there. When you have an RO, or you talking to your customers about how their car's valued right now, even though it might be in the middle of a 3-year lease, or it might be only a year after they bought the car, but they're just coming in to get the oil changed. Take advantage of those frequent touch points, because that's the crank that you're going to want to turn, and always creating more and more customers along the way.
Very good. Very good. Well, gentlemen, another question that's come in from one of our attendees, and just a reminder that we are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a link to that recording, so you can review the conversation, as well as share it with other colleagues at your store. The guest is asking, what have you seen that works well in equity mining for retail or APR clients, as opposed to a lease, and also another potential mining the service drive? What have you seen from those potential wells of customers?
Yeah, I think I'll tackle this one head first. So equity mining is really going back to what I talked about earlier, is that your first party data is the most important data you have, right? How are you maintaining that? What's the integrity of getting all that data into there? We have some stores where we've actually had to turn off equity mining, and it's simply because we don't have inventory. Like literally everything is sold out. General Motors, is frustrating as it is, and I'm sure there's General Motors dealers on here, versus Ford. Ford decided to put application and preference on customer orders, and General Motors did not. And we have Ford orders that are going to be built, and that is significant, right? But think about using your trade tools like CRM, your equity tools. Your equity tools help you identify customers who have a vehicle, what the car is worth, you're willing to offer them a pretty good trade-in value for that, and they may want to order a new car. It's just another form of CRM. But the formal, expensive equity tools that have algorithms built into them, you got to have something. I think Joe referenced that earlier. Everyone can sell their house now and make a ton of money, but you're going to lose all that equity into the increased price on the other end. It's no different with the automotive space. So I think the message there is that we've sort of turned that off in some cases because we just don't have anything to sell them, and it's frustrating. Like, believe it or not, they want one of the equity mining companies that we used actually suggested that we sell the customer another used car. I'm like, let me get this right. We sell them a new car, and now their car is used, and you want us to sell them another used car. That makes no sense at all. Like, why would we do that? To me, that's brain damage, right? Let's call it what it is. But I was like, no, we're not doing that.
And to quickly follow up, how about mining the service drive? If a unit comes in for routine maintenance or what have you,
yeah.
How can that be a potential?
Well, the best equity mining tools know when your customers are coming in. I mean, if you got a relationship with a customer, man, that's perfect. If you're new into the car business and you're listening to this, I would make the service drive your best friend, especially when it's attached to the store. I mean, think about all the people who are like, hi, I'm Joe, and you are, and because you know who they are, you know who's coming in, right? It's a gold mine. Look, first party data should be looked into this way. And I know the guys from Clairvoy use this line now because I taught them to say this. I'm like, when do you tell your spouse that you love them? The answer to that is before someone else does. Why would you put your first party data at risk, knowing what the customer is driving, knowing how long they've had it, knowing you've got the service records on it, knowing that they bought from you historically before, and not put some emphasis into keeping that customer as your customer, right? So tell your wife you love her before someone else does.
Hold on, I got to send a text message. 1 second. No, I'm kidding.
Joe, your thoughts on equity mining, either from the retail side or in the service drive?
I think the service drive, to Nick's point, is such a powerful place to create opportunity, to create conversations, and maybe it's for what's going to happen in 6 months. And to back to Nick's point, if we're looking at these incredibly long cycles of just the reality of being able to deliver a vehicle to a customer being months and months and months, what a better time to talk to them about that than in the service drive, right? Not all consumers have the awareness of what's going on in the marketplace, and so you become an educational touch point for your customer base. I think there's a lot of power in that, and I think that we kind of have the curse of knowledge in the industry where I think if you talk to most businesses and told them that you have a business where your customer base has to come see you frequently over the course of the lifetime of the customer, they would be beside themselves, because many businesses don't have that. You're hoping to keep customer loyalty, but I don't know what the exact figures are, but it's where people buy their vehicles typically is where they get it serviced, especially new vehicles. So I think that's something that really could be taken advantage of more, and the dealers that we have that are doing it, and many are, whether dedicating personnel to just wander around the service department, valuing people's vehicles and talking to them about that. We have some dealers that have done creative stuff with QR code hangers that are left in the vehicles. There's a lot of ways that you can create that as a really good touch point. And frankly, I think that one of our forward-looking goals, from a product standpoint, is to figure out, for maybe the first time, how to bridge the gap between variable and fixed ops, so that the service manager and the used car manager actually talk to each other more than once a week. Because if you can get those two guys talking, then you just created an acquisition pipeline, that could be pretty unique.
Nearing the closing moments here on our webinar, creating a buying center for inventory sourcing, with our two guest experts, Sean Niffen of Germain Motor Company and Joe Dallas of TradePending. And if you have a question for these gentlemen, please just use the chat function here on the Zoom platform. And gentlemen, Joe, we can continue with you, and then Sean, your perspectives as well. Just any recommendations as far as potential pitfalls to avoid when orchestrating a buying center, how to avoid being overly aggressive, or whatever the potential challenge might be. What guidance might you have there to keep the segments going and on the straight and narrow? Joe, we'll begin with you, and then Niff, your thoughts as well.
I think one of the universal appeals to our products and our methodology is that the dealer's really in the driver's seat on how aggressive or how neutral they want to be in what they're offering their customers. We give the dealer the ability to adjust all the reduction variables that lead from a retailed back approach to what vehicles are worth. And the honest truth is, a vehicle's worth whatever someone's willing to pay for it. And so we've seen, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but in markets where Carvana CarMax has a great beachhead deal, we give the dealers the ability to play in that ballpark. Where they're not, dealers can choose to be wherever they want to be in the spectrum. So I think that a pitfall could be hitching yourself to the wrong partner trying to do this, because that flexibility isn't there. And I think that a lot of those other companies would tell you, like, well, we have a recognized brand, and that allows us to say, hey, I'm Joe Book over here. Trust me, I've been around since 1914, which is a little bit different than how we do it, which gives the dealer the ability to say, look, this is just the market. You pull up Zillow.com, search your address. I can tell you what your house and what the market is for your house and all your neighbors around you. And we're just having that same approach with vehicles. We're the Zillow's estimate of vehicle values. And that's a very different conversation to have with a consumer as opposed to, this is a good number, trust me.
Very nice. Very nice. Nif, your thoughts on avoiding pitfalls, not overheating the buying center, or whatever moniker you want to put on it.
Yeah. No, I mean, think about this too. Long before we had this acquisition strategy challenge, if you will, for the marketplace, we would always coach our teams and say, look, when you get a trade pending lead, talk to the customer about the trade, not the car that you think they want to buy, right? Because the intent is that the customer just wants to know what their car is worth. If they want to buy a car from you, they'll eventually buy a car from you. But if you email in and that's what you want to know, then answer the question, right? The one thing that I will say this too is that every store, one of the best practices we see is that every acquisition opportunity has to involve a manager, right? What I mean by that is that if we don't take it upon ourselves to train up our people to get that manager involved, the manager has to be aware, whether it's a service manager, as Joe was mentioning, and a sales manager, but that relationship is important. So, and the last thing is this, and I can't tell you who told me this, but it was so good. And I'll give this alias person credit one more time, and then I'll just take credit for it. But the Moneyball, y'all seen the movie Moneyball. The Moneyball thing was that, okay, what was it? It was how many times did you get on base, right? Moneyball in the acquisition game is how many appraisals are you doing? The more appraisals you can do, the more times you're going to acquire a vehicle. And maybe we're just not doing enough of those, whether they're remote and digital, or they're in presence at the dealership, or they're in the customer's driveway. But the point is that we've got to figure out how to do more and more appraisals, okay? Our competition, who don't happen to be franchise dealers, have done an amazing job with that, and they're acquiring 200,000 vehicles a year. So why are we struggling with that? I'm sure that's why they're on the call today. It's like, why are they frustrated with that?
Very great points, Nif, as you referenced before we got started, that Moneyball question, trying to increase that frequency of appraisals. Closing moments here on our webinar, creating a buying center for inventory sourcing, with Sean Niffen of Germain Motor Company and Joe Dallas with TradePending. And Joe, we'll go back to you, and then Nif will have the last word to round us out. Just any what might be your parting thought, your final suggestion, or just an anecdote that you wanted to share that thought would be interesting or noteworthy to the guests on the line, just to round us out. Joe,
an anecdote. I didn't know I was going to be able to tell stories. I would have had one ready for you. No. Yeah. Well, a couple of things coming up for us. One, keep a lookout for some new products. Hopefully, NADA we'll have something to talk about. More than one thing to talk about, actually. So Nif, bring your credit card. And I'm kidding. But this time of year, we're thinking about kind of the spring swing of conference seasons. And we're excited about NADA and some news that we'll have there. And then, looking forward in the spring, Nif and I are frequenters of David Kane's conference there in Lexington, Kentucky, that, this year is going to include some horse racing and some bourbon tasting. So that's gotten even better. I'm going to speak at that conference as well about something I haven't decided yet. And David Kane's like, you got to get me your deck pretty soon. So I got to get to work on that. But encourage everybody to come see us at NADA. And I just got our booth number texted over to me because I didn't remember it, but we're at 6635 in the North Hall. So really excited to be back in person with everybody, man. I think we're all just starving to get together and shake hands. And we did some deep market research and found that people love free drinks. So we will have an open bar at our booth. Everybody come by, grab a drink, have a conversation, and looking forward to seeing what happens over the next year in this awesome industry. And as always, we'll be ready to adapt, just like as partners, just as NIF's ready to adapt as a great dealer group.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Nif, your final thoughts on what it takes to have a great buying center, and just your thoughts on the industry in general as 2022 rolls on.
Yeah, as Joe was saying, adapt or die, right? The business is changing, and it's changing faster now than we've ever seen before. I'll be at NADA. If anybody would like to reach out to me and have some personal one-on-one conversations, nif@germaincars.com, send me an email. We'll connect, or connect on LinkedIn. But I will say this, that the partnerships that we form, TradePending, David Kane and I started a Digital Marketing 20 group back in 2015. That group has, I think, close to 300 rooftops in it across the country. A lot of smart people getting together to share ideas, and this has been one of those topics. But put some emphasis in your partnerships that say, hey, how do I get this done? Because you can't do it on your own. But when you go to NADA and you form these alliances and these partnerships, they help bring answers to difficult questions. It does give you perspective as well, right? Because it can't be just yours. We can get narrow-minded when it comes to this kind of stuff. But I give a lot of credit to our partners like TradePending, David Kane, guys like Clairvoy. I'm on the Auto Trader Dealer Advisory Board, and I've learned to formulate some great relationships there where we get to do some things that maybe just haven't come to market yet, right? So I appreciate the honor and the opportunity to share with everybody. This is one of those partnerships that has been in place for a long time, and there's a reason for that, right? It's because it works, and what makes that work is people like Megan, who are behind the scenes helping us when we have issues, and guys like Joe and Bryce are helping pave the path for new opportunities and new technology that are emerging. So we embrace change here. Change is just opportunity to get better. So it's been an honor and a pleasure to speak and serve, and looking forward to catching up with everybody at NADA.
That's Sean Niffen of Germain Motor Company and Joe Dallas of TradePending. Gentlemen, have greatly enjoyed this conversation. Certainly all the best for continued success at each of your organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. This has been great. Hope everybody has a good, safe week, and look forward to speaking to everybody soon.
Absolutely. And on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group and Auto Remarketing, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.